Everybody, welcome to another episode of Cat Shorts as we take a look at big ideas of the Christian faith in small packages, walking through Martin Luther's Small Catechism for guidance along the way. So we have been delving into the beginnings of what prayer is, what prayer isn't, and the pattern, the template, the conversation starter for prayer that we call the Lord's Prayer. And today we're going to jump right into the opening part of the Lord's Prayer and what our older brother in the faith wants to point out about it. So grab your Martin Luther Reformer hat or a 16th century Reformer equivalent and let's get into things. And to start the conversation, let's start talking about something they didn't have either when Martin Luther lived or when Jesus lived, and that's caller ID. One of the things I love in this age of smartphones like these is that when I get a phone call, it can tell me. My phone tells me who's calling me. I can remember a time, I'm sure you do too, when the phone rang and you had no clue who it was who was calling you. Not that it's a huge deal. We still conducted regular, ordinary life, but what a difference it makes when I see the call coming in and I know the kind of relationship and probably the kind of conversation I'm about to have. It makes a difference, right? When the phone rings and the voice on the other line is a computerized recording saying something like, "Dear valued customer," I know this really isn't aimed at me, and there's not really a genuine conversation in store for me. On the other hand, if my phone rings and it says "Mom," I know I'm going to get to talk to my mom. If it's a dear friend, I know the kind of conversation I'm likely to have. The way we address ourselves, the way we get introduced to people, whether it's in a phone call or a piece of mail you get in your mailbox or an email in your inbox, they say something about the kind of conversations and the kind of relationship we think we are in. So, for example, if you get a piece of mail that's labeled just "Dear Resident," you know this isn't really intended for you specifically as a person. On the other hand, "Dear Sir" or "Madam" or "To whom it may concern" is pretty formal, pretty distant, right? There's a difference, too, between, say, a relationship of a boss and an employee compared with, say, two friends who are on even par with each other, or between a parent and a child, or between two spouses or dear friends of one another. There are all sorts of different kinds of relationships, and the way we call on somebody says something about how we frame the picture, how we frame what kind of relationship we're in, right? If I address you like I'm a customer and you're my waiter, you don't get to question the things that I order, right? Your job is just to bring me the thing I ask for, even if it's a terrible order, right? If I order spaghetti with peanut butter sauce and a side of fresh lemon wedges, you just smile and nod and you bring me what I ask for. On the other hand, if I'm the lowly employee, bottom of the totem pole at work, and you're the boss, I approach you with a certain amount of fear of, I'm not sure I want you to find out that I did something wrong or I messed up, because I'm worried you're going to fire me. My belonging depends only on how well you think my performance is going. On the other hand, there are relationships that are permanent. To address somebody like your parent, to call somebody mom or dad, for example, is a permanent kind of relationship. Other kind of relationships do change in life. Your boss right now is likely not going to be your boss forever. The people who are beneath you in the organizational flowchart at work are not necessarily always going to be in that role. And your waiter, my goodness, when you go out to a restaurant, when that day comes again, and we go out to restaurants, when your waiter appears and introduces themselves, that's not a permanent relationship. That's for right now, for this transaction, I'm your server and I will be bringing you food, and then that will be the end of this relationship. But to call on a parent is a permanent kind of relationship. It is to say, no matter what else comes along the way, I'm here for you if I'm your parent. And no matter what you need, I'm here to listen and to attend to what your needs are. And your belonging in the parent-child relationship doesn't have anything to do with your performance, with how good you are, smart you are, even how well-behaved you are. That belonging is simply a gift of grace. So, when we get to the beginning of what we call the Lord's Prayer, and our older brother in the faith, Martin Luther, zeroes in on this, Jesus intends for us to address God in the kind of familiar, permanent language of a parent and a child. Our Father who art in heaven. Or Jesus has this way of calling God Abba, the Aramaic, which has the feeling kind of like Papa or Daddy maybe, or Father. It's intimate. It's not sort of stern Father, but it's got this sort of closeness, this relationalness to it. And that's different than calling on God, O eternal sovereign, who is distant and aloof, right? It's different than calling God master, who, could fire me if I don't do a good enough job. It's certainly different than God being the server at the restaurant and me being the customer, and whatever I want you have to give me, God. It's even different than appealing to God like some invisible force, like from Star Wars, or some impersonal bureaucracy, like if I write to the IRS or to the government. I know that there's not a personal entity behind that who cares about me. I'm just writing to some sort of informal or to some impersonal bureaucracy. But Jesus says we're invited to call on God like a child calling on a parent, which means the relationship is permanent, which means it is one in which God is always the one who is providing, giving, and never one who gets something out of the deal, and that our giving and our seeking and our coming to God is never a matter of us impressing or us demanding things from God. Kids don't get to demand things and just get whatever they ask for from parents. Parents get to decide. No, you don't get 3 helpings of ice cream. You get to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I will provide for your needs, but not whatever you wish for. That's an important place to start. Luther says Jesus invites us to think about God the way kids think about their parents. It's a permanent relationship. It's one that's based on grace and self-giving. It's not based on what I earn or how I impress, and it's one on whom I can depend. It's like recognizing that when we call God, God never looks at the incoming phone call and goes, this is probably spam, or this is just a recording. God sees our prayer requests come in, so to speak, and says, it's my beloved child. I need to listen to this. Everything else in our conversation about prayer starts with that kind of relationship. That starts with seeing God as a parent who cares for us, not a server who has to give us whatever we order, and not a boss we have to be afraid of. That changes everything. So we'll dig further next time, but thanks for joining us here today on Cat Shorts.